It was supposed to be just another quiet morning on the edge of a small Georgia town, the kind of morning where birds chirp, neighbors wave politely, and the sun peeks through the pine trees without a care in the world. But that calm didn't last. That morning would set off a chain of events that none of the officers involved could have imagined. Because in their rush to assert power, they made one fatal mistake. They messed with the wrong man. The man lived in a modest house at the end of the cul-de-sac. It wasn't anything fancy. A small porch, a wind chime, a flag hanging from a pole in the front yard, faded and sun-worn. He kept to himself mostly, always polite, always calm, always silent. He wore loose-fitting clothes and moved with the quiet confidence of someone who didn't need to prove anything. To the neighbors, he was just Mr. Harris, a widower, a dog, lover, and the kind of man who would shovel snow from his neighbor's driveway without being asked. But what they didn't know, and what the police were about to learn in the hardest way, was that Mr. Harris wasn't just another retired man with a dog and a peaceful heart. He was once known by another name, not one you'd hear in regular conversation, not one you could even find in the official records. The name was whispered in corridors, etched into war briefings, and burned into the memory of every operative who ever fought beside him. Master Sergeant Elijah Harris, Delta Force, a living legend in the military community. But he had left that life behind years ago. All he wanted now was peace, and that peace had a name: Shadow. A big black Belgian Malinois with intelligent eyes and a calm presence. Shadow was more than a pet. He had served alongside Elijah during his last deployment. They had saved each other's lives more times than they could count. Shadow wasn't just a dog. He was family. Loyal, obedient, protective. And above all, gentle with children, neighbors, and strangers alike. That morning, everything changed. It started with a misunderstanding. A neighbor's call about a large black dog loose in the yard. A rookie officer responded, then another. Within minutes, 2 patrol cars were parked in front of Elijah's home, their lights spinning lazily in the golden sunlight. Shadow had been sitting on the front steps, alert but not aggressive. When the officers approached, he stood, ears perked, tail low and calm. But fear, especially mixed with power, can be a dangerous thing. The young officer, barely out of training, reached for his belt, a warning shout, a bark, and then a shot. It echoed through the neighborhood like thunder cracking against the earth. Birds scattered, curtains twitched, children froze mid-bite over cereal bowls. Elijah ran out barefoot, still in his morning clothes, as Shadow let out a final broken whimper and collapsed at the base of the porch. For a moment, time stopped. The officers, realizing their mistake, stammered explanations, hands still on their weapons. But Elijah, he just knelt beside his fallen companion, stroking the fur that was already going cold. No shouting, no rage, just silence. A silence so thick it made the officers uncomfortable. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly, almost to himself. One officer muttered, "Sir, we thought he was going to attack. He came at us." Elijah looked up. His eyes, once calm and kind, were different now. Still, empty, controlled. But underneath there was something ancient and dangerous, something honed through decades of war and loss. The younger officer took a step back. "I said, you shouldn't have done that," Elijah repeated. They had no idea who they were talking to, no idea that they had just triggered a storm that wouldn't be stopped with excuses or paperwork. But Elijah didn't lash out. He didn't yell or threaten. He just stood up slowly, wiped his hands on his shirt, and looked at the badge numbers. Then, without another word, he walked back inside. The door clicked shut behind him. Across the street, an elderly woman had seen everything. She trembled as she dialed her phone. "They shot Shadow," she whispered to her daughter. "And Elijah. He didn't even get angry." That's the scariest part. Within the hour, the officers filed a report. They left behind apologies and vague promises that it would be handled properly. But by the next morning, the video was online. A neighbor's Ring camera had captured everything. Shadow hadn't been aggressive. He hadn't moved an inch toward the officers. The world saw what happened, and so did a few people who once served under Elijah, men who hadn't heard his name in years. Now they were watching, remembering the man who once led them through the darkest missions, the one who never lost a soldier or a dog under his command. Something was shifting, and while the town whispered and speculated, Elijah prepared quietly. Meanwhile, 100 miles away in Atlanta, a high school senior named Jamal was getting on a crowded city bus. He had no idea about the events unfolding in that small town. His world was different. College applications, part-time jobs, helping his mom at the store. He wasn't thinking about Delta Force commanders or viral police body cam footage. He was thinking about his future and wondering if he'd made the right choice turning down that basketball scholarship. He had dreams, sure, but they came with weight. Being a young black man in the city meant thinking 3 steps ahead all the time. The bus jolted to a stop. A pregnant woman in her late 30s stepped on, looking exhausted, her hand resting on the small of her back. Nobody moved. People glanced up, then back at their phones. Jamal sighed, stood up, and offered his seat without saying a word. She smiled gratefully. "Thank you," she whispered. He nodded. "It's nothing." But as she sat down, she reached into her purse, pulled out a folded note, and handed it to him. "Please read this later," she said, her voice low. Jamal looked at her, puzzled, but slipped the note into his backpack. Back in the small town, Elijah sat on his porch again, alone this time. No shadow at his feet, just silence and a growing storm inside him. The local sheriff tried to smooth things over, calling it a tragic error in judgment. The department promised to review protocol, but no one came to apologize in person. No one called. No one checked in. And that silence told Elijah everything he needed to know, because there are men you don't provoke. Men who have given everything for a country that too often forgets their names. Men who have buried brothers in the desert and watched nations fall from rooftops. Men who survive because they remember everything and forget nothing. And Elijah Harris? He remembered everything. He remembered every mission, every betrayal, every mistake. And now, he would remember the officers who stood over Shadow's body, guns still warm, eyes wide with fear. He had buried comrades before, but never like this. And somewhere, deep within the quiet man with the gentle eyes, something was waking up, something old, something lethal. And as the world watched the video clip again and again, some outraged, others dismissive, Jamal sat on his bed that evening and finally unfolded the note the pregnant woman had given him. His hands trembled slightly as he read the words. It didn't say thank you. It didn't offer money or praise. It simply said, "Your kindness saved 2 lives today. But you don't know who was watching. Someone saw you, and everything's about to change." Jamal frowned, confused, unaware that this message would pull him into a story far bigger than a bus ride, far deeper than a simple gesture of kindness. Unaware that across the state, a man was preparing for war, not with violence but with something even more dangerous. Purpose. And the world wasn't ready for what came next. Jamal sat there for a long time, just staring at the note. He turned it over, his hands like there might be more written on the back, like maybe it was some kind of joke. But it wasn't. The handwriting was careful, delicate, like someone had taken their time. "Someone saw you," the words repeated in his mind again and again. It felt like more than just a thank you, like it wasn't just about that one moment on the bus. There was something underneath it, something he didn't understand yet. He stuffed the note back into his bag and tried to shake it off. He had homework, a shift at the grocery store later, and a dozen other things to think about. But the note stayed in his thoughts like a shadow, quietly following him. That night, as he closed the store and walked home under the dull glow of the streetlights, he kept glancing over his shoulder, not because he felt scared, but because, for the first time, he felt watched. Miles away, Elijah was in the garage. The door was locked, the lights dim. Dust danced in the air, and the place smelled faintly of oil and old metal. He hadn't been in here much since he retired. Not like this. But tonight was different. He opened the old locker in the corner, the one with the dented door and the heavy padlock. Inside, it was exactly as he'd left it. Tightly rolled maps. A black case with faded tags. Tools that didn't belong in any regular civilian toolbox. He knelt slowly, placing a weathered photograph on the workbench. It was an old team photo. Desert uniforms, faces covered in grit and sweat. They were all younger then. Some of them were gone now, buried, forgotten. But a few were still out there, living quiet lives just like him. He picked up his satellite phone. It hadn't been used in years, but it still worked. There were only a few numbers programmed into it. He scrolled down, stopped at one, and hesitated for just a moment. Then he hit call. Somewhere in South Carolina, a man known only as Reeves answered on the second ring. "Been a while," Reeves said, his voice calm and gravelly. "They killed my dog," Elijah said, his tone flat. A long pause followed. Then Reeves replied, "Do you need help?" "Not yet," Elijah answered, "but I might," and that was all that needed to be said. In Elijah's world, you didn't waste words. You didn't beg for justice. You didn't post angry rants online. You gathered information. You moved in shadows. You watched, listened, and when the time came, you acted. Clean, precise, unstoppable. And right now, Elijah was gathering. Back in Atlanta, Jamal tried to focus at school, but everything felt different. He kept playing the moment back in his head, the tired look in the woman's eyes, the way she had reached into her purse like she already knew what she was going to do. And that note. How could she know something that he didn't? At lunch, he pulled it out again. He hadn't told anyone about it, not even his best friend, Malik. Jamal figured they'd just laugh it off. "Your kindness saved 2 lives today." Whose lives? Hers and the baby's? That would make sense, right? But then there was that last part. Someone saw you. It didn't feel like a metaphor, it felt real. That night, Jamal's mom noticed he was quieter than usual. She watched him from the kitchen as he picked at his food. "You okay, baby?" She asked gently. "Yeah, just thinking about something," he said. She gave a knowing smile. "You don't get extra credit for thinking too hard, you know." He forced a laugh, but it didn't last. Later that night, as he lay in bed staring at the ceiling, Jamal heard something. Just a soft sound like footsteps on gravel outside. He sat up, heart racing. His room faced the street. Carefully, he pulled back the curtain and looked out. Nothing. Just shadows from the street lamp stretching across the pavement. But he could have sworn someone was out there. The next morning, things took another strange turn. When he got to school, there was a black SUV parked across the street, windows tinted, engine running. It was still there after first period, still there after lunch. Jamal mentioned it casually to Malik, but his friend shrugged it off. "Could be anyone," he said. "Parents, security, whatever." But Jamal knew better. His instincts were sharper than most. It was something his mom always said. You've got your daddy's eyes. He could read people without them saying a word. So when the SUV showed up again the next day, and again after that, he started writing down the plate number. Meanwhile, Elijah had begun his quiet investigation. He didn't file any formal complaints, didn't call any lawyers. Instead, he studied the officers, watched their routines, their shifts, their homes, not for revenge, but for understanding. Who were they? What had they been taught? Who trained them to fear a dog like Shadow? And most importantly, who was protecting them now? What Elijah discovered was disappointing but not surprising. The department was small, underfunded, and poorly trained. The officer who shot Shadow had already been involved in 2 previous incidents, one involving excessive force, another involving a traffic stop that ended with a community complaint. Both had been swept under the rug, but this time the internet wasn't so forgiving. The Ring camera footage was still making its way across social media. Civil rights groups were starting to notice. Comment sections were filling with outrage. But even so, the town police were stonewalling. No official apology, no investigation, no accountability. So Elijah started reaching out to people who could make things happen. One of them was a retired general. Another was a tech specialist with connections to private surveillance networks. Quietly, without making a sound, Elijah began piecing together the story that no one wanted told. And in the middle of it all, a boy named Jamal had no idea he was being pulled into that same story, because what he didn't know, what he couldn't possibly have known, was that the pregnant woman on the bus wasn't just some tired commuter. She was part of something much bigger. She had been under quiet surveillance for weeks. She had made a choice that morning to step into public, to risk being seen, all for a single test. She needed to know, was kindness still alive in people? And Jamal had passed, but now that act had placed him on someone's radar, someone who saw beyond the gesture, someone who had been watching both him and Elijah. Because unknown to them both, a network had been forming. A silent circle of veterans, intelligence officers, and analysts, disillusioned with the system, but not yet broken. They had been waiting for a reason to act, a reason to believe, and in two completely separate towns, two completely separate. People had just given them that reason, one with a sacrifice, the other with a seat. And the people at the top, they were starting to notice.